The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries filled the morning air as Sarah wiped down the counters of Café Esperanza for the 100th time that day. Her small cafe, tucked between a discount clothing store and a pawn shop on Madison Avenue, wasn't the glamorous part of the city, but it was hers, or at least it would be if she could keep making the payments. "Morning, Miss Sarah," called Mr. Wilson, a retired postal worker who came in every day at precisely 7:15 a.m. for his black coffee and blueberry muffin. "Good morning." The usual. Sarah smiled, her dark circles hidden behind a warm expression she'd mastered over years of customer service. "You know it. How's business?" Sarah's smile faltered only slightly. Getting by one day at a time. That was an understatement. The truth was that the cafe was struggling more than ever. 3 new corporate chain coffee shops had opened within a 5-block radius in the past year. Each day brought fewer customers to her doors, but Sarah refused to give up on her parents' dream. They had poured their life savings into this place after immigrating from Guatemala 20 years ago, naming it Esperanza Hope because that's what it represented for them. As she handed Mr. Wilson his order, the bell above the door chimed again. Sarah looked up, expecting another customer, but instead saw a hunched figure limping away from her entrance window, clutching a weather crutch. The man wore layers of tattered clothing despite the warm May weather, his face obscured by an overgrown beard and a worn baseball cap. He settled himself painfully on the sidewalk about 10 feet from her entrance. Sarah had noticed him appearing in the neighborhood over the past week, but he'd never come this close to her cafe before. Through the large front windows, she could see him arranging a small cardboard sign and a dented tin cup. The morning rush, if you could call 6 customers a rush, came and went. By 10:30 a.m., the cafe was empty again. Sarah found herself repeatedly glancing at the man outside. Nobody stopped for him. Most pedestrians gave him a wide berth, some actively crossing the street to avoid him. When lunchtime approached, Sarah prepared sandwiches for the sparse midday crowd. On impulse, she made an extra turkey sandwich with avocado and provolone, her specialty, and poured a large cup of hot coffee. Before she could second-guess herself, she walked outside. "Excuse me," she said, standing a respectful distance from the man. "I thought you might like something to eat." The man looked up, and Sarah was struck by the clarity in his pale blue eyes. They seemed too alert, too intelligent for someone in his condition. "That's very kind of you," he said, his voice surprisingly articulate and gentle. "Not many people bother to see me, let alone offer food. I'm Sarah. My cafe is right here if you need anything." He accepted the food with weathered hands that trembled slightly. "Thank you, Sarah. I'm James." That was the beginning. Sarah didn't know it then, but that simple turkey sandwich would change both their lives forever. The next day, James was there again. And the day after, each day, Sarah would bring him something different from her menu, along with a hot drink. Sometimes coffee, sometimes tea when his cough sounded particularly bad. "Why you keep feeding that homeless guy?" asked Elena, Sarah's only part-time employee and longtime friend. "We barely make enough to keep the lights on." Sarah shrugged. "My parents taught me that you always share what you have, even if it's not much." "Your parents also taught you about running a business," Elena countered gently. "And giving away free food every day isn't in the business plan." Sarah knew Elena was right. The folder of unpaid bills in her office drawer was growing thicker, and the bank had already denied her request for another small business loan. But something about James drew her in. Maybe it was those eyes or the dignified way he thanked her each time, never begging, never demanding, just grateful. One rainy Tuesday, 3 weeks after their first encounter, Sarah noticed James struggling to stay dry under the narrow overhang of the neighboring shop. With a sigh, she walked out with an umbrella. "James, why don't you come inside? It's pouring out here." He hesitated. "Your customers won't mind, and there aren't many of them anyway." The self-deprecating joke fell flat as the truth behind it stung. Inside, James sat awkwardly at a corner table, his crutch leaning against the wall. He seemed intensely aware of his appearance, the way his worn clothes contrasted with the cafe's warm, if dated, decor. "May I ask what happened?" Sarah ventured, nodding toward his leg as she placed a bowl of homemade chicken soup in front of him. James's hand unconsciously moved to his right leg. Car accident. Long time ago. I'm sorry. Don't be. We all have our crosses to bear. He gestured around the empty cafe. Business slow? Sarah nodded, surprised by his directness. The chains are killing me. People want their coffee in branded cups these days. But they don't serve soup like this. James said after tasting a spoonful. This is magnificent. Old family recipe. My grandmother's. From Guatemala. The secret is the cilantro and lime, isn't it? And perhaps a hint of cumin. Sarah blinked in surprise. How did you... I traveled extensively in my younger days, James explained. Before. He gestured vaguely at himself. That day marked a shift in their relationship. James became a regular fixture in the cafe during off-peak hours. Sarah learned he was well-read and knowledgeable about subjects ranging from literature to international cuisine. He never spoke much about his past beyond vague references to travel and study, and Sarah didn't press. The neighborhood regulars had mixed reactions. Some, like Mr. Wilson, were surprisingly accepting, often nodding hello to James. Others stopped coming altogether, which Sarah couldn't afford but refused to remedy by turning James away. You're hurting your business for a stranger, Elena warned one afternoon as they watched James slowly make his way down the street after closing time. He's not a stranger anymore, Sarah replied, and I'm not sure the business can be hurt much more than it already is. The truth was that Sarah found James's company oddly comforting. In him, she found someone who listened without judgment as she spoke about her struggles to keep the cafe afloat, her parents' declining health back in Guatemala, and her own deferred dreams of traveling the world. Why don't you go? James asked once. See the places you talk about? Sarah laughed without humor. Who would run this place? Who would take care of my parents? Some dreams are just dreams. James nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes our responsibilities become our identity. We forget who we might have been. Do you? Forget who you might have been. His blue eyes grew distant. No, that's the curse. I remember exactly who I was, who I am. By the 4th month of their unusual friendship, Sarah's financial situation had become dire. The final notice from her landlord sat unopened on her desk, but she knew what it said. After 15 years, Café Esperanza would close its doors within 30 days unless she could produce $30,000 in back rent and fees. That morning, she served customers with a wooden smile, each cheerful "have a nice day," feeling like glass in her throat. When the last lunch customer left, she flipped the sign to close 2 hours early, sank into a chair, and finally allowed herself to cry. That's how James found her when he tapped on the glass door with his crutch. Sarah considered pretending she didn't hear, but something in his expression told her he'd already seen her tears. She unlocked the door. "Bad day?" he asked gently, hobbling to his usual corner table. "Bad year." Sarah wiped her eyes with her apron. "Actually bad 3 years." "Tell me?" And she did. The words poured out of her about the loans, the dwindling customers, the property developer who kept leaving business cards with increasingly aggressive offers to buy out her lease, about how she'd stopped taking a salary 6 months ago, about how she couldn't bring herself to tell her parents that their American dream was collapsing. "I just don't know what to do anymore," she finished, staring at her hands. "This place is more than a cafe. It's my heritage, my family's legacy, and I've failed it." James was quiet for a long moment. "You haven't failed, Sarah. You fought admirably against forces much larger than yourself. There's no shame in that battle, even if you don't win it on your terms." "Easy for you to say," she snapped, instantly regretting her tone. "I'm sorry that was unfair." "Was it?" James's voice had an odd edge to it. Perhaps it wasn't. Something in his expression made Sarah uncomfortable. For the first time, she wondered how much she really knew about this man she'd been feeding for months. "I should get ready for tomorrow," she said, standing abruptly. "We close at 3 on Wednesdays." James nodded and gathered his crutch. "Thank you for the meal as always." At the door, he paused. "Sarah? Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Don't give up just yet." After he left, Sarah found a $50 bill tucked under his empty coffee cup. It represented far more than he could possibly afford as a homeless man, and the gesture broke her heart all over again. For the next 3 days, James didn't appear. Sarah found herself worrying, scanning the streets whenever she had a free moment. By the 3rd day, she was genuinely concerned something had happened to him. Maybe he moved to another neighborhood, Elena suggested, not unkindly. Without saying goodbye, Sarah shook her head. It's not like him. On the 4th day, just as Sarah was closing up, a sleek black town car pulled up outside the cafe. She watched curiously as the driver opened the rear door. A man in an immaculate navy suit stepped out, and Sarah's heart stopped. It was James. Gone was the hunched posture, the limp, the crutch. He stood tall and straight, his beard trimmed neatly, his hair cut in an expensive style. Only those unmistakable blue eyes remained the same. The bell chimed as he entered. Sarah stood frozen behind the counter. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his voice the same gentle tone she'd grown accustomed to. "Who are you?" she whispered. He extended his hand. "James Montgomery. And I owe you an explanation." James Montgomery. The name clicked in her mind, a reclusive billionaire, tech innovator, philanthropist who had disappeared from public view 3 years ago following a scandal involving his company's board of directors. There had been rumors, mental breakdown, terminal illness, secret government work. "You're not homeless." It wasn't a question. "No." "And you're not disabled." "No, I'm not." He gestured to a table. "May I sit?" This is a longer conversation than you might think. Sarah nodded numbly, following him to the table where he'd sat so many times before in tattered clothes. "For the past 2 years, I've been living periodically as a homeless person in different cities." James began. "1 month every quarter, I leave everything behind and live on the streets." "Why?" The single word contained all her confusion and budding anger. "It started as an experiment. I become disconnected from reality, from how most people live, struggle, and survive. My board accused me of losing touch with our customer base, with what real people need." He traced the wood grain of the table with his finger. "They weren't wrong. So you played homeless?" Sarah's voice hardened. "Like some bizarre reality show?" "At first, yes." James met her gaze unflinchingly. "It was an experiment, but it became much more. I learned things about our society, about human nature, about myself that I could never have understood otherwise." "And I was what?" "Part of your social experiment." The hurt in her voice was palpable. "No, Sarah, you were the exception that changed everything." He leaned forward. "In 2 years, in 12 different cities, you're the only person who offered help without being asked. The only one who saw me as a human being worth your time and resources, even when you were struggling yourself." Sarah stood abruptly. "I need to finish cleaning up." "Sarah." "No." She cut him off. "Do you have any idea how I worried when you disappeared? How I've been giving you food I can barely afford to give, while you have what billions in the bank?" $7.8 billion as of the market's close yesterday, he said quietly. "And yes, I understand why you're angry. You have every right to be." "Get out." Sarah pointed to the door. "Whatever game you're playing, I'm not interested." James stood slowly. "I'm not playing a game, Sarah. I came back to thank you and to help you, if you'll let me. I don't need a billionaire's charity." "No, you don't. But perhaps you could use a business partner." He placed a business card on the table. "When you're ready to talk, call that number. Any time, day or night." After he left, Sarah sank into a chair, the business card untouched on the table. She felt used, betrayed, and yet confused. The James she'd come to know over the past months had been genuine in so many ways. His insights, his kindness, the way he listened, had that all been an act? And why come back at all? If the experiment was over, he could have simply disappeared forever. She finally picked up the card. It contained only a phone number, no name or company. With a heavy sigh, Sarah tucked it into her pocket and continued closing the cafe for what might be one of the last times. Sarah didn't call the number. Days passed as she went through the motions of running her cafe, serving the few remaining loyal customers, and preparing for the inevitable closure. The eviction deadline was now just 2 weeks away. News of James Montgomery's reappearance in public life made the business pages. His company's stock had jumped 12% overnight. There was speculation about a new product launch, a merger, or expansion into emerging markets. Nothing about living as a homeless man or visiting small failing cafes. A week after James's revelation, Mr. Wilson came in for his usual order. "You know," he said conversationally, "sometimes pride costs us more than we can afford to pay." Sarah looked up sharply. "Excuse me? That fellow who used to come in the one with the crutch. He wasn't what he seemed, was he?" Sarah stared at him. "How did you? I may be old, but I'm not blind. Saw him get into that fancy car last week. Then I saw a picture in the paper." Mr. Wilson shrugged. "Life gives us few chances, Miss Sarah. The smart ones take them when they come." After he left, Sarah found herself holding James's business card again. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting by the phone. "Sarah, I'm still angry," she said without preamble. "I know. And confused." "That's fair. Why me? Why my cafe?" James sighed. "Chance. I didn't select you or target your business. I was simply in your neighborhood during this quarter's experience. You were the one who approached me, remember?" Sarah did remember. It seemed like a lifetime ago. "I'd like to meet," she said finally, "to talk. But not here." "Name the place." She suggested a public park 2 miles from the cafe, neutral ground. He agreed immediately. James was already seated on a bench when she arrived the next morning, dressed casually but still impeccably in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. No sign of the town car or driver. He appeared to have walked or taken public transportation. "Thank you for coming," he said, making no move to stand or approach her. Sarah sat on the opposite end of the bench. "I'm still processing all this." "Understandable. Why did you come back? You could have just disappeared." James gazed across the park, where children were playing on a colorful playground. "Because you matter, Sarah. What you did matters. And because I'm tired of disappearing." He turned to face her fully. "For the past 3 years, I've been searching for something real in a world that feels increasingly artificial to me. My company creates products that connect people digitally while they grow more disconnected personally. I've accumulated more wealth than I could spend in 10 lifetimes while watching communities like yours struggle to survive. So this is about guilt?" "Partly," he admitted. "But it's also about finding purpose again. Your cafe, what you've built there, it's authentic. The way you interact with your customers, the food you serve, the community you created. It matters in a way that stock prices and quarterly earnings never will." Sarah studied him, looking for signs of the James she had come to know. Despite the expensive haircut and designer clothes, his eyes were the same, thoughtful, kind, searching. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked finally. "A partnership, not charity," he emphasized. "I invest in Café Esperanza enough to clear your debts and renovate the space. We expand the concept, focusing on what makes it special, your family recipes, the community atmosphere. You maintain majority ownership and complete creative control. And what do you get out of this?" James smiled slightly. "A good investment. Despite your current struggles, there's potential there. Also," he added more softly, "a connection to something authentic, and perhaps a friend who saw value in me when I appear to have none." Sarah looked away, unexpectedly moved. "I need time to think." "Of course. But time is one luxury you don't have much of right now." He stood. "The offer stands regardless. My assistant will deliver a formal proposal to you tomorrow. No pressure, no strings attached. As promised." The proposal arrived the next morning, a comprehensive business plan that respected everything Sarah loved about her cafe, while suggesting thoughtful expansions and improvements. The financial terms were more than fair. They were generous. Still, Sarah hesitated. Accepting felt like admitting defeat, like saying she couldn't succeed on her own. "That's your parents talking," Elena said when Sarah confided in her. "They did everything alone because they had to. You don't have to." That evening, Sarah called her parents in Guatemala. Through tears, she finally told them everything the cafe struggles, James's true identity, his offer. Mija, her father said gently, Esperanza was never about doing it all alone. It was about creating something meaningful that brings people together. If this man sees the value in what you built and wants to help it grow, that's not failure. That's success. The next day, Sarah called James and accepted his offer. The renovation took 6 weeks. True to his word, James gave Sarah complete creative control, though he offered suggestions based on his observations of the neighborhood and market trends. The cafe expanded into the vacant space next door, adding a community meeting room that could be reserved free of charge by local organizations. They kept the name, though James suggested a small addition. The new sign read, Café Esperanza, where community matters. Sarah insisted on maintaining affordable prices despite the upscale renovations. We serve neighbors, not tourists, she said firmly. James agreed. The reopening day arrived on a perfect autumn morning. A line formed around the block, drawn by curiosity about the mysterious partnership between the local cafe owner and the billionaire tech mogul, story that had captured media attention after a business reporter spotted James at the cafe during renovations. As Sarah prepared to cut the ribbon across the new entrance, she noticed James hanging back, letting her have the moment. We do this together, she said, gesturing him forward. Partners, remember? As they stood side by side, scissors poised over the ribbon, James whispered, Thank you for the turkey sandwich. Sarah laughed. Most expensive sandwich in history, apparently. Best investment I ever made, he corrected. The cafe thrived beyond either of their expectations. Within 6 months, they'd opened a second location in another struggling neighborhood. By the 1-year mark, there were 5 Café Esperanza locations across the city, each partnering with local residents to maintain the authentic community feel that had become their trademark. James continued his quarterly experiences, though with Sarah's knowledge now. Each time he returned with new insights and observations that they would discuss over coffee in the original cafe after closing time. You changed me, he told her during one such conversation. Before I met you, these experiences were academic, an intellectual exercise. You taught me to see people really see them. You changed me too, Sarah admitted. I was so focused on preserving my parents' legacy that I stopped growing, stopped dreaming. You showed me that growth isn't betrayal. The success of their partnership led to the creation of the Esperanza Foundation, which provided microloans and mentorship to small business owners in underserved communities. The foundation's motto, printed on all its materials, read, Everyone deserves to be seen. 1 year to the day after their grand reopening, Sarah and James sat at a corner table in the original cafe. The evening crowd had thinned, leaving just a few regulars, including Mr. Wilson, who now led a senior citizens book club in the community room every Thursday. I have something for you, James said, sliding a small wrapped package across the table. Sarah opened it to find a beautiful shadow box frame. Inside was the original weathered cardboard sign James had used during his time on the street. It read simply, Invisible. To remind us both, he said quietly. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Nobody is invisible at Café Esperanza. Outside, a young woman hesitated by the cafe entrance, clearly debating whether to come in. Sarah recognized the look of someone who hadn't eaten in too long. Excuse me, she said to James, standing up. She walked to the door and opened it wide. Would you like to come in? Sarah asked the woman. The soup today is especially good. The woman looked surprised, then grateful. I don't have much money. That's okay, Sarah smiled, stepping aside to welcome her in. Everyone's welcome here. From his seat, James watched the interaction with a quiet smile. Some experiments never truly ended. Some lessons continued to unfold. And sometimes the most valuable transactions had nothing to do with money at all.